Whenever we speak Black liberating truth, which includes speaking candidly about the white society, they always falsely now label us as being racist towards them. It's a gaslighting tactic that they use to censor us. Don't let them fool you. Speaking Black liberating truth is not racism. When we allow the white society to keep our dialogue within the boundaries set forth by them, we're allowing ourselves to remain mentally enslaved by them. We must always speak the truth, regardless of who it offends. We must teach the truth even if our own brainwashed people hates us for doing so. We must teach it whether it fills the room or clears it out. We must post truth whether we're hated for it, berated for it, or blocked for it, or even unfriended for it. We must teach the truth regardless of who it offends, because we are called by our ancestors to feed and awaken the sleeping sheep, not to entertain the goats. We must always speak the truth regardless of who it offends. But what's equally important is that we must also always question and challenge the validity of all information that we receive from the white society. An absolute fact is that throughout history, the Caucasians have demonstrated an entrenched predisposition for deceit that matches their proclivity for racism. Throughout history, the Caucasians have demonstrated a proclivity for deceit that remains unmatched by all other racial groups. These are the same group of people that writes our history books. And every decade or so, they revise it to make themselves appear less immoral and much more humane throughout history than they truly in fact were. In fact, everything that we now believe comes from these people. Not only do they write our history books, these are the same people who wrote the Bible. They write all of our societal narrative, our statistics. They control all of the narratives you're hearing in the mainstream media. It all comes from them. We literally get all information from history's proven most notorious liars. Given this fact, to not question the validity of all information that we receive from them is absolutely absurd. I mean, you wouldn't accept a meal prepared by a known serial food poisoner. Of course you wouldn't. Yet Black people blindly accept information from history's most notoriously deceitful liars. And much of that information is filled with fraudulent propaganda that's designed to make us think in a way that serve the white society. Whenever those that have proven themselves as being the most narcissistic group throughout history, whose proclivity for deceit is matched only by their proclivity for racism, when they're the ones controlling all information, they'll always feed us lies that serve their hidden nefarious agendas and that feeds their racist and narcissistic needs. It's who they are. It's the way they've always been, and it's the only way they know how to be. Have you ever wondered why or how come, in spite of such a brutal history to the contrary, that millions of Black people blindly accept whatever Caucasians say as being true? Facts. Many have short-sightedly said that it's because Black people are too forgetful, or that Black people suffer from collective amnesia. It's actually because Black people have been deliberately socialized to perceive the white society as being the authority of all that's true, in spite of such a brutal history of the contrary. Black people have in fact been socialized to think in ways serving the interests of the white society. It's the worst and most hidden aspect of the white society's conquest of Africans. Unlike at the conclusion of World War II, when the less than 12-year Jewish Holocaust came to an end, the US government and the UN contributed massive financial support to rebuild their lives. There was no moral obligation to do the same for Africans. Although the African Holocaust lasted hundreds of years longer, resulted in millions of more deaths, and more greatly decimated the African culture, when slavery ended, America, Great Britain, and the many other white nations that benefited from the brutal exploitation of Africans felt no moral obligation to restore the culture of Africans. Those Western nations that benefited greatly through the exploitation of Africans, they focused on their own self-interest. by socializing the minds of Africans to think in ways that benefit the white society. Africans throughout the diaspora have been socialized. Socialized when the oppressor exploits their monopoly over information that are systematically fed into the minds of the oppressed to manipulate the oppressed to think and behave in ways that are beneficial to the oppressors. Regardless of how intelligent people are, if it's possible to control the information that a targeted population receives, it's entirely possible to control what they'll believe and how they will think. The white society exploits its monopoly over information that black people systematically receive to instill a value system into the collective minds of black people that serves and protects the white society. White social scientists describe this hidden nefarious practice as merely instilling a value system into the collective minds of black people that makes it adhere to the authority of the existing dominant white society. It's how the white society now protects itself from massive unified black retribution. The process is called socialized. Oh, this is not some feeble-minded conspiracy theory. So, throughout Western history, those empires that were brutally oppressive, fearing retribution from the oppressed, have always socialized their minds. Because whenever people are oppressed for long duration, their collective aggressions toward their oppressors will continue to grow until acts of massive rebellion becomes inevitable. It's an inherent response within the collective human psyche when people are under long-term oppression. To prevent this inherent response, the oppressive society socializes the oppressed population to think in ways that prevents them from seeking retribution. This usually involves shifting the collective aggressions of the oppressed away from the oppressors and redirecting it against themselves. This is precisely what the white society has done to Africans throughout the diaspora. It's the hidden reason why many black people now perceive themselves as being their own worst enemies and revere as Caucasians in spite of real history to the contrary. It's why many of us are self-loathing and reveres Caucasians. Now, this mindset within black people is far too widespread to be coincidental. Of course, it's not. It's by deliberate design. It's always by deliberate design whenever the oppressed thinks in ways that benefits the oppressors. This mindset was deliberately embedded into the collective minds of black people by the white society through their monopoly over information that we receive. It's always because the oppressed have been socialized when they think in ways benefiting their oppressors. The basic tool for socializing an entire generation of people is to control all the narratives that they receive. If you can control all the narrative, you can then determine what these people will believe. There are 4 ways to effectively socialize a people, way to manipulate the human brain. It's by what they're taught, by what they see, by what they hear, and through repetition. Because the white society controls the education we're taught, the media images we see, the societal narratives that we hear, and through repetition. They exploit these combined factors to socialize black people without us even realizing it. This is a hidden fact. Don't dispute facts you haven't heard for a Willie Lynch myth you've been misled to believe. Doing so will keep you mentally enslaved by the white society. The truth of our condition is the white society has socialized black people. The socializing of black people is also being reinforced daily. Presently, white government agents that specialize in psychiatry and propaganda analyzes and studies everything about the black population. Our beliefs, our likes, our dislikes, our strengths, our vulnerability. This surveillance information is gathered, and then decisions are then made on which fraudulent stories to produce to best create certain psychological feelings amongst black people that keeps our collective aggression shifted away from the white society and redirected towards ourselves. It's keeping us within this condition is how the white society now prevents us from unifying against them. This is the absolute fact. The white society's exploitation of Africans has provided it with an era which it has flourished most throughout history. To allow this era to end would be directly against the interests of the white society, especially given that the white society's dependence on Africa's natural resource is indefinite. Therefore, they instead socialize black people to think in ways that prevent us from unifying against them. It allows them to continue exploiting us without any black resistance. To not have socialized black people would have placed the white society in direct conflict of its own self-interest. The African slaves of the 21st century are those who cannot overcome their socialized mind. This is our reality. We have to confront this reality in order to overcome it. They have us so distracted. They have us distracted with a fake religion. They have us distracted with the hip hop industry, staring us all over the place that we can't get our minds straight. We are being socialized by the white society. We must recognize this, confront it, and develop ways to overcome it. This is the truth about plight and condition. One love and peace, brothers and sisters.